I'm going to show you how to make a delicious pistachio and coconut cake. So if you're new to baking, the first thing I would say is make sure your oven is at the right temperature. Get to know your oven, because when you get a new oven, it kind of varies a bit. Now, the second thing I would say is definitely weigh all your ingredients in advance, because if you don't, you're going to get halfway through and find you've forgotten something. So I've turned my oven on, I've weighed out my ingredients. What else do I need to do? I personally like a loose bottomed non-stick pan. I think it's easier for getting out the different ingredients, the different produce, and also I double check everything by doing some parchment paper and also a little bit of spray oil. Now you can buy something called Cake Release, but I just use a nice coconut oil, but it's entirely up to you. That bit's not so important. So I'm just going to give it a quick spray, and then put my parchment paper in, my baking non-stick parchment paper, which you can get in any supermarket. So the reason I like this cake, it's got a bit of texture to it because you've got some pistachio in there. So there's a bit of crunch. So it's not like your traditional Victoria sponge cake. It's got a little bit something going on inside. Right, so that's lined. I'm going to put that to one side. Now, the beauty of this cake is you don't need any fancy equipment. It's a really good one to start with. And all you need is a bowl and a wooden spoon. Simples. So the first thing I'm going to do is add some apple cider vinegar to my plant milk. So personally, I like to use almond milk, but if you prefer oat milk, fine, soy milk, fine. Pretty much any plant milk will do. Personally, that's just my thing. Now, the reason we're adding it to the milk is what it does, it oxidizes and helps with the stability of the cake and also helps it rise. So it's basically replacing a buttermilk. So that's what you're making. You could also add a lemon juice to it instead of apple cider vinegar. But if you can get your hands on apple cider vinegar, then that's perfect. And you're going to let that stand. Okay, next up, I've got in here my self-raising flour. I'm just going to make a little well in the center, and I'm going to add in my raising agents. I've got bicarbonate of soda and I've also got some baking powder. In it goes. So you want to work relatively quickly. The reason being is it's going to start activating. The raising agents are going to start activating. So I like to give it a little shake. Any lumps will come to the top and you can kind of get rid of them. But remember, because we've got the pistachio in there, it's going to look a bit lumpy anyway. Don't worry about it. Now I'm also going to add some desiccated coconut to it as well. And I'm going to save a tiny bit for decoration. So in goes my desiccated coconut, in goes my pistachio, in goes my caster sugar. And then we've got, so that's our dry ingredients. Give that a little mix round. Nice and simple. Nice and quick. So this is a really good quick bake. You can also freeze it as well. So you can always got a nice fresh cake when your guests come round. Another tip for you for decorating a cake, especially a plant-based cake, I actually like to do it frozen and then it kind of defrosts with the icing on it. Okay, so again, a little well in the center. I'm going to add in some oil. Then we're going to add in some vanilla. I love vanilla. They always say 1 teaspoon, but I never use 1 teaspoon. It's not enough. I like to use at least 2. And then my plant milk and apple cider vinegar. And we're going to give that a nice stir. And you can hear it bubbling. You can hear the science behind it. So this is a good one to do with children as well, because there's no ingredients, there's no chopping. The only thing you kind of would do is, if you don't buy crushed pistachios, is to maybe use a rolling pin or whatever you've got to crush them up. And pistachios, I love the colour. They're full of fibre. They've got lots of different vitamins and minerals. I mean, I know we're making a cake, but why not make it, a little bit healthy? And that is it for our batter. So I'm going to bring in my cake tin. So I'm using a 6-inch deep cake tin. I like it because I find it a bit more on trend, if you like. So the traditional, which is a 9-inch, is a little bit more, not old fashioned, a bit more traditional. So I like these because I like to stack them up as well, which is great for looking a little bit fancy. Anyway, that's more on that later. So in it goes. Get all that lovely mixture in. And then you're going to get that in your preheated oven. And you're going to bake it for 30 minutes or until a skewer comes out clean. You want it to be nice and golden on the top. There you go. And in the oven it goes. Whilst the cake's baking, now's your time to make a lovely sugar syrup. Now, what a sugar syrup does, it adds a little bit of flavour and sweetness, and it's super easy to make. You just want equal parts of sugar and water. So in it goes. You can, of course, add some flavouring at this point, but I think because the cake's packed with flavour, we're not going to need that. So you're going to bring it to a boil. And we're going to bring it to a rolling boil. So you don't want it too high, because mine was quite high. So you want to keep it nice and low and then gently bring it to the boil, which I'm doing now. So whilst it's doing that, I want to talk to you about decoration. I think we eat with our eyes, so it's really important to have a lovely decoration. So I've got some of the crushed pistachios that were used in the cake. And of course, it's nice to know, give a nod to what's actually in the cake. I've also got some of the desiccated coconut that I kept behind because that's a nice combination of white and green. And something which you may or may not want to use, I've got some edible dried rose petals. And I think it really gives a nod to the Middle Eastern pistachio rose water type cake that we're making. If you don't have these, pomegranate seeds would work really well, or just nothing at all. But if you can get them, which I got mine online, grab yourself some rose petals because they look really beautiful in salads, on cakes. With sugar syrup, you either want to use hot sugar syrup on a cold cake or cold sugar syrup on a hot cake, which is what I'm going to do. So this has been on for a few minutes and I can see all the sugars dissolved, which is what we're looking for. As it cools, it will thicken as well. So I'm going to get that into a bowl. Be very careful, obviously, because it's very hot. And we'll leave that to one side for later. In regards to decoration, I think we eat with our eyes and it's really important to have some beautiful decoration and a nod to what's inside the cake. So we've got the crushed pistachios, which I saved a bit back, so we're going to sprinkle them over, as well as the desiccated coconut. And something else which you may or may not add, it's completely up to you, is some edible dried rose petal. They've got a beautiful fragrance that goes really well with the pistachio and they look so pretty. Now, you can get them online. If you can't get them for any reason, pomegranate seeds work really well, or just leave it with the pistachio and desiccated coconut. We're going to leave our sugar syrup to one side to cool, and then let me just quickly talk to you about decoration whilst the cake's cooling. We've got the lovely pistachios, which have crushed and look that vibrant green colour, and they're going to add some extra crunch and texture. And we've also got the desiccated coconut, which is pure white and looks fantastic. A little bit different, something different is edible rose petals. Now you don't have to add these, I just think they look really pretty, but they've got quite a strong rose taste, so it's up to you. You can get them online. If not, pomegranate seeds also look lovely, or just leave it with the pistachio and the desiccated coconut. My pistachio and coconut cake is baked in the oven and I've tipped it out. Now, big tip for you. What you might find, and not always, it depends on your oven. It can literally depend on the time of day. You might get a little dip in the middle. Don't panic, don't worry, that's absolutely fine. If it's super big, then yeah, maybe you want to adjust your oven times. But if it's just a little dip, that really doesn't matter, because what you do once it's cooled is you tip it over so the bottom is the top. Okay, which is exactly what I've done. And then you're going to peel off really carefully your parchment paper. So a little bit might come off, but that's absolutely fine. And we've got a slight dip, but again, that absolutely doesn't matter. So I'm going to start off by putting a little bit of my sugar syrup around the edge, because you might find when you're baking that the edges go a little bit firmer sometimes than the center. So then we put the little bit of sugar syrup on, that will soften them and add the sweetness. I'm not going to add too much because I can see that my cake's nice and moist. I know people hate that word, but it's nice and moist and I don't need to add any more. But I'm going to add the decoration. So I'm going to add tons of the lovely pistachio, because it gives it the crunch and the colour and the texture. And I just think it works so well. So you can be quite generous and liberal with this. And it just smells so good. Now, I have to say, talking about things dipping and things not going quite right, another really good tip for you, and I've done this a million times, I've been baking for years, I'm a trained professional, but sometimes things go wrong. So what I do, if I've made a lovely chocolate cake the other day, but one of them didn't come out right, so I just crumbled it for decoration on top, and it looked fantastic. So there's always something you can do. Failing that, my biggest piece of advice would be just eat it. So I'm going to add in coconut, so it gives a nod to what's going on inside. And then lastly, again optional, I'm going to add in a little bit of colour with the rose petals, just because I think it looks pretty. The reason I made this cake, or I came up with a pistachio and coconut cake, is because they're two of my favourite ingredients. I love anything with coconut, and I love the smell of coconut. It reminds me of holidays, tropical places, good times. And pistachio, mainly because I love the colour. It's so unusual to have that vibrant green colour in a nut. And so I just love it because it just looks so good. And yeah, so it's just my favorite kind of colors and textures and tastes. And the pink of the rose. Rose is one of my favorite smells, and I love lavender. Not I've cooked with that. I have made lavender and truffles in the past, but for this particular cake, I just think it works really well. And for me, it gives a nod to the Middle East and Turkish delight and just all lovely things. So I'm just going to tidy up the outside edges. I just think if you've got like friends over, or there's a celebration, it's just a really nice cake to have in the middle of the center of the table. It looks pretty, it looks different, and it's just a change from your normal cakes. I'm just going to add a tiny bit more. More is more. And a little bit of that. And there you have it. Super simple, super quick pistachio and coconut cake. I hope you enjoy it.